Hi there, my name is Dr. Tim Grivois, and I'm really grateful that you're here watching this video on effective behavior support planning. And so you'll notice there's some interactive features that would normally be part of the live session. They're not going to work quite the same way, obviously, if you're watching the video, but we'll go ahead and talk through a lot of those slides too, so we can still just benefit from that kind of thinking inside our heads and inside our hearts as well. Again, I'm just so glad that you're here. This is just an always timely topic in terms of how do we get our arms around kids that just need an awful lot of us. And what can we do to make it just genuinely tailored to meeting those needs in ways that are actually realistic and effective, and especially just for all those caring educators out there who really are just digging deep to care for kids who just sometimes communicate their need for us in ways that are very challenging. I'm just grateful for you, and I'm just really glad that you're here. Thanks so much for being here today. And as we get started, I just want to share just a little bit about myself. Just so kind of start more or less in the left and go to the right. And so again, my name is Dr. Tim. My pronouns are he, him, his. And I do a lot of outside stuff with my family. And so starting up here, there's me. There's my oldest. My oldest is 13. There's the twins. The twins are 7. They love being outside. And this is my friend Adam, and then my partner LaShawn, and then we're all going together on a hiking trip here in Tucson at a place called Sabino Canyon. So if you're from Tucson, you know Sabino Canyon probably pretty well. It's a real beloved place to get outside, and we're lucky because we have lots of great places to get outside into nature here in Tucson, Arizona. Right below it, I'm just really proud to share that this one was student of the quarter this quarter. And don't worry, because this one was student of the quarter last quarter. And this is their first grade teacher who absolutely loves them and cares for them. And I couldn't be more grateful that she is their teacher each and every single day. I'm grateful for all of my kids' teachers for all the years they've been in school. But just they have a really special connection with Ms. R right there. And so I'm just glad to be able to share that right now. These are some amazing teachers from Yuma, Arizona. Yuma is a great place. I never thought I'd have a chance to work, but it is. If you're not from around here, then your lettuce is absolutely from Yuma, Arizona. For goodness sakes, it's a cool thing to know about it. But there's these amazing teachers here, and this is from one of my favorite PDs to run. One of the most evidence-based interventions we have for students with ADHD is time outdoors and physical activity. And so this particular PD takes teachers outside, where we get to explore our campus from the outside in. So we can take kids outside and integrate physical activity into learning. This next person here, if you're a country music fan, you might know him. His name is Kane Brown, and I'm an absolute Kane Brown fan. I've seen him in concert several times. And this was most recently, my partner bought me tickets to go see Kane Brown in San Diego for the very first concert of his tour this year. An amazing gift. It was absolutely perfect. And so we're going to go see one of his artists. We're going to see SZA and Kendrick Lamar later on this year. But this was just such a treat to get a chance to go to this concert and to spend it with this guy too. But the next day, we had a chance to go see the Cherry Blossom Festival, which is at the Japanese Friendship Garden in San Diego. Beautiful, just amazing day. I just one of those things where it's like just spending time with people that you love. It's just delicious, and I hope that you get lots of time to do that whenever this weekend happens for you. My oldest is definitely a cat person, and she was a cat person about 9 lives ago, I would say. And so this is our cat Trisket, who decided that she does not want to be an indoor cat. And we've done everything that I can think of to do to make her an indoor cat, but she's just an absolute ninja at getting outside. And so we hadn't seen her for a very, very long time. But then all of a sudden she started coming around again and meowing. And Anjali just took charge of the situation and just decided she was going to feed her and make sure she knew that she was loved and still welcome around the house. And it's just been really just neat to see, Anjali just show care for Trisket in this way. I'm not necessarily a cat person myself, but I'm definitely a my daughter person. And watching her I don't kind of step up to the occasion a bit. It's just makes me proud and just makes me fall in love with her just a little bit more. And so thank you so much. I'm just really glad and grateful that you've given me this chance to share a little bit more about myself. And I hope that if we have the opportunity to spend time together in a live session or in person, that I get to know you a little bit better too, just in ways that feel safe and authentic to you. But just thanks so much. It just gives me just such joy to be here and to share just a little bit beyond just the professional work that I do. Now, professionally, I've been working as the executive director of TGS Educational Consulting for about 5 years. It's a fancy way of saying I do a lot of professional development for amazing caring professionals in education and in nonprofits, usually in the area of behavior interventions or mental health, and right now more specifically in the world of ADHD and anxiety and lots of stuff just on challenging behaviors in general. And one of the things that we've absolutely learned over the years is that every single child is uniquely themselves. And one of the key challenges of behavior support planning is really tailoring our strategies to something that makes sense for the kid and makes sense for the situation. And so I'm just grateful that you're here because I know that it's hard, and I hope that the time together is as useful as you need it to be. Now, in the live session, this is usually where I invite folks to just stop and pause and maybe take a breath if they'd like to, and just consider what might be on their mind and on their heart. And in the live session, just different things pop up. You might have some people say, "Oh, geez, I don't know if I started the dishwasher this morning, or I've got to get my car fixed, or I can't wait to see my grandbabies this weekend," or any number of things that it might be. But it's often nice just to stop, as we think about setting some intentions for learning, and just kind of just notice what's there, especially if it's completely unrelated to the reason why you logged onto this video in the first place. It's such an honor to have you here, and I'm just glad that you're here. And maybe just have a chance to stop and honor yourself a bit. Just notice what's on your mind, what's on your heart. Pause. If you feel like writing it down, go ahead and pause the video and do that. But even if you aren't able to, because we're watching the video, to share up out here or up out loud, engaging the activity inside our heads and inside our hearts is perfectly okay too. And I'm grateful that you took this chance to pause and to honor and to just notice what's there, because what's there is exactly the right thing, and you're in exactly the most beautiful place to be, which is right where you are right now. Right. In the live session, I also ask participants to think, what goal might you have for our time together? And it's very common for folks to say, like, strategies. I want strategies that are going to help support my student. Now, I'll tell you what, I don't know your student, so it's going to be really difficult for me to come up with strategies that are likely to work here in this situation. And so we're not going to talk so much about strategies. We're going to talk about just different mental models and frameworks and templates that we have that are going to help us tailor the strategies that we've got to fit our students' needs a little bit better. And so if you've got a specific situation, you want to schedule time to talk with me, I'm absolutely delighted to talk with anybody about behavior, any ways that I can show up for you and to help make your work more effective for you and for the students that you have in your care at any level of the organization. I'm absolutely happy to do. We could do that on Zoom. We could do that on email, any kind of way at all. I just want you to know that strategies is not exactly going to be what this time is about. It's going to be thinking about what are some of the ingredients of an effective behavior support plan, no matter what strategy we might be choosing to support the children and youth in our care. Now, since August, I'm curious to see which of these situations might you have encountered. One common situation is that you have support, but that support isn't necessarily available for you right now, or if it is available, it doesn't seem to be the effective kind of support that we're looking at. So, all right, we have a student with challenging behavior, we have a behavior team, we ask the behavior team to come. They're either not available, or the support they provide doesn't really seem to work, or in some cases might even sometimes make it a little bit worse for the first little bit as they get to know the student. That's a common situation. Another situation that we find ourselves in is, we have a student, they've got some really challenging behaviors right now, and waiting to collect 6 to 8 weeks of data isn't really an option, because the behaviors are the data essentially, and we are living this data out loud right now, and we can't really just wait on a solution here. And oftentimes people are signing up for this because literally nothing we've tried has made any difference at all whatsoever. I've got no more ideas. Tim, can you please give me a list of 10? We'll work through them one by one. And all of these are perfectly appropriate places to be, and common things. I'm just kind of curious to see, which might be the situation that you're in. And so, obviously in the video, I won't be able to know, and it'd be hard for you to share with me unless you send me a text or email or something. But stopping and thinking, which of these situations might you have experienced since August can sometimes help you, even watching the video, set an intent for the kind of learning that you might want to be doing right now. Okay. Now, I want to start here with some common reasons why behavior support plans might not work the way that we intend them to do. And the first reason why is a lot of times we have some very unrealistic expectations that are written into the plan. And so there's a lot of great ideas that will sometimes come up when we meet to develop behavior support plans, but it's often sometimes a plan that's more aspirational than realistic when it comes to actually putting something in practice. So one of the things that I'll often recommend that schools do is, before we commit to a plan, asking everybody who's going to be involved in implementing this plan, is this something that I realistically can do? And if it is, let's see how it works. Let's see the positive change come along. But if it's not really something that we honestly can do without a lot of extra support or help or extra time or stuff like that, it's probably going to be a better idea for us to think about strategies that we can realistically expect of ourselves, of each other, and of our colleagues, especially because we really want our behavior support plans to be a promise that we know we can keep, rather than an exercise in compliance and data taking. Now, the next reason why behavior support plans often don't work is because the strategies are misaligned. A lot of times this happens when, we have a student with ADHD. So somebody, researches strategies for ADHD, and they pick the first 5 that seem reasonable. We give them a try. but we're not necessarily thinking about this particular individual child and what they need and what seems to work for them and why these strategies need certain kinds of relationships to be put in place. Like, all of those things are going to be really important. And so one of the things that we'll want to think about as we start thinking about this work is, okay, so we can choose some strategies. We can think about, what's going to work best. But what can we do to make sure they are aligned as best as we possibly can? And I'll tell you what, one of the biggest reasons why strategies and behavior support plans are misaligned is because the child or the youth is absent from the process. That instead of involving them in the process of creating their support, what we often do is we meet in a small room with a group of people. The teacher, the family might be there. There's a principal. There's might be even some behavior specialists who are there doing some kind of support in some kind of way. A lot of really caring people are together in the room coming up with a plan. But the person who really knows the most excellent source of data that we've got is going to be the child. It's going to be the youth. And very often they're absent from that process from the very beginning. And so I'll tell you, so a behavior support plan that doesn't involve the youth, that doesn't centralize their voice and their participation is going to take a lot longer to work, if it works at all, than something that involves that voice from the get-go. Right. So Tim, how do we do that? How do we involve a 6-year-old in that process? How do we involve a senior in high school in that process? And while obviously it's going to be different, and we have to change the language that we use and the way we have these conversations to make them developmentally appropriate for the children and youth that we're talking to, the process honestly is pretty simple. We can make sure that the strategies that we use with children and youth are going to be aligned if we talk with children and youth first. And it starts really with this. It starts by listening first. It really starts by listening. And often I'll approach a situation something like this. Like, hey, you know what? It looks like every time we go to math class, things get a little bit tricky. I'm kind of wondering what's up with that. And very often, children and youth are very surprised to hear somebody actually ask that genuinely and truthfully and genuinely wanting to know the answer to that. And so sometimes you will hear like, I don't know, or sometimes we might hear maybe some a tone that's got a bit of an edge to it. It's real important as we're engaging in that listening process that we don't really worry about the tone. We don't focus on the language that students use. We really work on listening. And that's really for two reasons. One is because the child is going to be the most excellent source of data about how they are experiencing the problems that they're having in the classroom. And they're also going to trust any kind of agreements that we make a whole lot more if they believe that we're actually listening. And so we can't fake listen. We really got to do it for real. And that listening first part is going to be important. And then the next part really is just sort of explaining the issues. Like, all right, yeah, I mean, I hear you that, that from, as far as I can tell, the issue here is that, Miss Smith in math class can be a bit disrespectful to you and doesn't really feel good. She's asking you to do a whole lot of stuff that you don't really know how to do. And so you'd rather not do it. And so that seems to be why these worksheets are getting crumpled up and thrown. All right. That makes sense. When you explain it like that, it makes sense. Now, the thing is that crumpling up worksheets and throwing them at teachers, that's going to cause some problems here. It's going to make it hard for everybody else to learn. That's going to get you in trouble a whole lot. It certainly can't feel good for the teacher involved, and it's not something that we're really allowed to just have happen. And so I'm wondering then, well, what could we do about it? Now, when we ask this, what could we do? When we ask the what could we do, very often, especially when kids aren't used to being asked these kinds of questions, they're going to say, I don't know, or I don't have any kind of idea. And I think it's really important that we take the time and just give some good wait time, because very often some amazing solutions can come up. For example, hey, maybe doing the math right now is just too much to ask. Would it be okay if you're just maybe kind of sit quietly while the math happens? Can you learn the math without necessarily doing it just for now? Sometimes we can come up with solutions that'll work for now, and we can step by step get closer and closer and closer to the ideal way, to the ideal dynamic that we might be looking for in a situation. But very often, if we start with talking to the children and youth first, and we listen first, and we explain the issue, why, whatever's going on is actually a problem here, then we can ask that question. Hey, well, what could we do? And we can ask it in a real sincere, real genuine way. And we can come up with some very good ideas that are collaborative, and we can think about these kinds of things ahead of time. And so, really, this model here, I think, is very much based on the collaborative and proactive solutions model, and that's by Dr. Ross Green. And I don't want to present his model as well as he can present his own. And so, if you go to livesinthebalance.org, you're going to get just a whole video tutorial of how to do this in some really beautiful ways. And it's something that we'll take a chance to look at in the live session for sure. Now, I want to start with why talking to youth is very, very important. Now, check-in, check-out is probably an intervention that if you're in any kind of way implementing a multi-tiered system of support and you've got tier 2 interventions for behavior, check-in, check-out is very likely the intervention that you're using. It's very common in PBIS frameworks, and it's even common in schools that aren't using PBIS frameworks. And it's just honestly very deceptively simple. A student is recommended to participate in check-in, check-out. Then they participate in a morning check-in with the teacher. With their check-in, check-out coach. Then there's regular teacher feedback. Then there's an afternoon checkout. There's somebody else who's going to do some data work. Then the team's going to meet. They're going to maybe make some changes if they need to, or maybe one day the student's going to be ready to exit. But in any case, the main thing is that check-in, check-out works when adults build positive relationships with students, and there's always these frequent check-ins, these frequent opportunities to help students meet their goals. Now, the trick, though, is that usually when schools are implementing check-in, check-out, the goal that they're selecting is hardly ever one that the child had anything to do with. It usually is something that's very generically based on their school values, like being respectful or being responsible or being safe. And then the check-in, check-out form usually just rates, hey, were you perfect in all these values, or were you less than perfect? And if you're less than perfect, you're going to get less than perfect scores. And that's essentially the data that we talk about during check-in, check-out. But what if we did something completely different and we made check-in, check-out about goals that are actually going to help the student succeed in school rather than just generic aspirational ones that connect to school values? Well, in that case, then that's going to happen when we actually talk to the youth involved. And so this is a different way of approaching check-in, check-out that follows that idea of involving the child or the youth first in that conversation. And so imagine instead of that normal check-in conversation that doesn't necessarily have a real good shape to it, but now it looks something like this. Okay, so today you're going to focus on being responsible by getting started with your reading right away. We're going to identify the target behavior right here. Now, next, we're going to practice it and celebrate it. Now, we usually don't need to practice and celebrate every single day. We might do it more frequently with littler learners or the very first time when we're talking about middle and high school learners. It's very important. But it is important that very first check-in that we do this, because we don't want to send students to the classroom without knowing for sure that they can do what we're asking them to do. And so it's going to look something like this. So, all right, so today you're going to focus on being responsible by getting started right away during independent reading time. And so it might feel a bit silly, but we're going to practice it and celebrate. I'm going to hand you this book right here, and you're going to open it and start reading it as soon as you do, okay? All right, so here's your book. Right, and then of course the student was going to open it. They're going to, they're going to read it a bit, and then I'm going to say, "Oh my goodness, excellent job! Show me those reading muscles." I might do something like that for the third grade student I'm remembering right now who absolutely loved WWE. But the point is to celebrate somehow. Now, you can celebrate any way you want, any way that feels authentic to you. Obviously, I'm not going to do something like that in high school or in middle school, unless the high school or middle school student really liked WWE and we had that kind of relationship. I don't know, maybe I would. But the point is we are going to celebrate somehow that the child practiced it, the youth practiced it, and we're going to celebrate that we noticed it and we saw it was good. So that way, when they go to school, when they go to class, they know exactly what it is that they need to do, and we're sure that they've done it correctly at least once. Now, this next part is important too, where we're going to ask the child to think through, we're going to predict some obstacles here. Now, obviously, a child wouldn't be on a behavior support plan of any kind if everything were going fine and this were a skill that the student knew how to do, to open the book and get started right away. If they knew how to do that, we wouldn't be setting this as a goal for them. So we might ask, now sometimes it's been tricky to get started right away. What do you think is going to be the most difficult thing about getting started right away? Now, the first time we ask students this question, they might not necessarily know, but maybe they do. And they might say something like, well, sometimes I'm sitting next to my friends and I want to talk to my friends instead of getting started with reading. And then, okay, well, if they give us an answer, then we can make a plan. All right. Well, what are you going to do? What do you think you could do if you find yourself sitting next to friends and you're not reading a book? And usually the student will say, well, I could find a better place to sit. All right, well, kiddo, I think that's a great plan. Have a great day. I can't wait to talk to you about it at the end of the day. So why this particular approach to check in, check out works so much better than any other check in, check out approach I've ever seen. And I've been training on this for years. I've implemented check in, check out for even more years than that. But the reason why this works so much better is because we are involving the child in the planning process and the goal setting process. We are making sure they know exactly what to do, how to do it. We're celebrating it from the get-go. We're making a plan for if something gets hard, what are we going to do then? It's just going to work out so much better for us than, hey, all right, good to see you. Have a great day. Now, honestly, I will take the, hey, nice to see you. Have a great day. I would rather students start with a positive greeting from their check-in, check-out coach than no greeting at all. But we can elevate the quality of these conversations if we involve the youth in that planning process, rather than us simply telling the student what they need to do and what's going to be hard and what they should do. All right, and then at the end of the day, it really is very simple here, and the checkout coach is going to still have that same kind of conversation, but instead of focusing on what they're gonna do, they're focused on what happened during the day. And so, and what I like about this particular framework is we've got a script for if something was challenging, like every desk was flipped, every word was said, and somehow we got to dig deep and keep our feedback positive and brief and value centered. And the challenging day script is really useful for that. The mixed day script is probably the more normal one that we're going to do. It's the one that sounds a little bit more like, a typical day where, some stuff was good, some stuff maybe not so good. We can provide some feedback for that. But I think the most important one is the one on that successful day when the student did really, really great. And I'll tell you, I want to just share with you a really, just a funny example of a successful conversation I overheard with a high school student once. All right, so today you were supposed to get started with your work right away, and you were supposed to avoid some of the folks that you've had some conflict with in the past. And I'll tell you what, from what I can tell, you must have had a great day, because I didn't hear anything about it, didn't get any messages from your teacher. So congratulations. How do you explain your success today? Why were you so successful at avoiding conflict today? And I overheard the student say, well, and she was saying that the name of the student who, that they were often in conflict with got suspended today. And that was, kind of a funny, sassy answer, but still a very real and genuine one, and one that's important just to validate. You're right. When you have some time apart from folks that maybe you're in conflict with, your day goes a little bit easier. But usually it's a different kind of thing. It's usually that, hey, I put my plan into place. I did what we're supposed to do. And it's important for the student to be able to understand for themselves why today was successful. Because a lot of times kids who are sort of used to being in trouble a lot, they don't always feel very in control of when they're in trouble and when they're not. Especially our kids with ADHD or other neurological conditions, or just different flavors of neurotypes and neurodiversity. The symptoms of ADHD, for example, are not symptoms that a student can control at all. They just sort of show up. And so we don't want success to feel random. We want success to feel like, wow, you did a thing, you worked hard, and a result happened as a result of that. And so I do think that if you're going to involve youth, especially in these check-in, check-out mentoring kinds of conversations, that really we got to think about what to do when the day was successful, and how can we have repeats of that performance as well. Now, here's the thing. When you use these scripts, these conversations really don't take too long. It's usually about a minute or two, if that. And that, I think, is a really important thing to remember, is that I don't know many kids that really like to engage in hours-long conversations about their behavior. Keeping things brief, value-centered, and positive is going to be really important as we have these conversations. Now, I know that not every school uses check-in, check-out, but a lot of schools are using some kind of conversation-based intervention here. And so I'm offering these scripts just as a model for, if you're going to have these conversations anyway, you may as well have an idea about what you'd like them to be. In the ideal sense of what would you like them to be, and what would you like them to look like. Right. So the next thing we're going to take a look at is the Tier 1 problem-solving template. And I'm going to get that up on the screen in just a second. We're going to talk about what it's great for, what it isn't super great for, and also just how to use it. All right, so you should be looking then at an example of the Tier 1 problem-solving template right now. Now, I want to be clear that I'm not saying that this student is like the student that might be on your mind right now. And I'm not saying that the strategies that we talk about here are going to work. We're just going to just talk about just this particular example here and why it did work for the teacher in this particular situation here. And so what I always like to start with, and especially like if you're a school that uses Swiss or implements positive behavior intervention and support, you'll recognize that these solution components are definitely here and look a lot like the drill down worksheet on Swiss. But I think what's different about it is a lot of schools, number one, don't have access to Swiss and can't use it. And a lot of times too, just it's the data in Swiss can sometimes be very helpful if your school is really good at entering it accurately. But if it's not, sometimes it can be a little bit trickier to do. And so we're going to do our best with the data that we've got to use this tier one problem solving template, not so much to think about an exact, functional behavior analysis or a perfectly data informed way of doing things, but more about, hey, I've got a student flipping desk and tables right now. I don't have 6 to 8 weeks of time to collect data before we implement something. So what can we do right now to start collecting data on those strategies? That's going to be the way that you use this tier one problem solving template. So in terms of what it is, it's going to be a way to get started in about 10 minutes rather than 6 to 8 weeks of data collection. But what it isn't going to replace a full-blown functional behavior analysis or something that a school psych might do if that ends up being what the data warrants right here. So this right here, we should view it as a way of getting started. Now, why is it a tier one problem solving template? Because it really is something that you can do school-wide. You can get started with right now. It's not something that necessarily requires a whole bunch of data collection in advance. It just requires us, what do we know about the student as best we can? What seems to be the simplest way to state this problem? And then what are some things that we can give a try to right now? So the situation in this particular classroom was that there was a second grade student who was diagnosed with ADHD, and that's why I was working with the school in the first place. But whenever that student needed to complete independent work, that student would go everywhere except their seat. They would find 1,000 people to talk to and 1,000 centers to visit and stuff to do and other stuff to pull out instead of going back to their seat and getting the independent work started the way they were supposed to. And so we thought through then, okay, well, what could we do about that? Because it's going to take some time to collect some data. There's some thoughts about a potential 504 process here. Maybe getting some work with a behavior team involved. And those are all really great ideas, but it was going to take some time to get started. So what could we do in the meantime to provide some support for the student? And so the idea was, all right, well, let's figure out the text message version of the problem first. Whenever a certain prompt happens, the student often or always, well, what do? Okay. And so I like to think about this as sort of like, if the student is flipping desks, well, if I wanted to go into the classroom and make sure they flipped a desk, what would I do? And that could be something like, I might correct their behavior, or I might give them a task to do that they don't want. All behavior is always going to have some kind of prompt that happens right before it, right? So in any case, in this particular student situation, whenever the student needs to complete independent work, they go everywhere except for their seat. So the prompts being, it's time to do independent work. This is the behavior that we see in this situation. And so what we're looking at then is just different strategies that we've got. What can we do to prevent the behavior, which is to make the problem unlikely to occur? Now, this very often gets confused with reteaching here. Now, reteaching can sometimes prevent behavior, but it's not exactly the same because a prevention behavior, we're not trying to teach the student anything. We're changing the environment somehow so that the behavior is really unlikely to occur, usually by removing the prompts. Or if we can't remove the prompts, we're going to make the prompt a lot less effective somehow. So in this case, we're going to prevent the wandering around the classroom by walking with the student back to their seat and offering them help to get started. So we don't even necessarily have to tell the student we're doing this at first. We can just simply, everyone else is walking back to their seats. All right, kiddo, I'm going to walk with you. All right, you're back to your seat. It's so nice to see that. Do you need any help getting started? And if the student says yes, we'll help them. If the student says no, we'll go help somebody else. Now, the next part is really important. This is important for the adults working with the student as it is for the student themselves. And these are these recognition strategies which notice or celebrate when the opposite of a problem is happening. Now, it's really important, because we don't necessarily want to bribe with incentives. We certainly don't want to reward. We don't want to do anything like that. We simply want to say thank you for doing the thing that's helpful right now. And so usually this sounds something like that. Hey, mijo, thanks for being responsible by getting started right away. And we can hand a PBIS ticket if we've got them, but we don't need any kind of rewards or incentives attached to that because we don't want our students getting started right away with their work because they're looking for a piece of candy or an eraser out of the prize bin. Now that said, I don't think any kid exploded because they got a prize out of the prize bin, but you're going to have your recognition strategies be a lot more effective when they really are about recognition and not about rewards, bribes, or incentives here. Now, reteach strategies are those strategies that are going to equip students with skills they may not necessarily have right now. Now, it could very well be that students arrive at our class and don't necessarily know that when I'm supposed to go back to independent work, I need to go straight there. And so the goal here is just to teach students to use the correct stand timer for the task in this case, and then what they could do at their desk for a movement or brain break. So if the reason why we're thinking the student just doesn't want to sit down is that ADHD makes it hard to focus, then we're going to meet the need to get the work done, but we're also going to meet the need to have that brain break and have that opportunity to move. And so we're going to teach a student to choose the correct stand timer for the task. So if it's a task that takes 5 minutes, they'll choose the 5-minute one. If it's a 2-minute, they'll take a 2-minute one. And then when that stand timer runs out, they're going to have some options for things that they can do at their desk for a movement or a brain break. Like they might be able to set a 2-minute timer to doing some drawing or just roll their shoulders a bit, or maybe they've got some chances to do some stretches or whatever it is. But we're going to make sure that those brain breaks are as much as possible stuff that can happen at a desk or at least close to the desk here. And then sometimes, we're going to do a lot of stuff, but especially at first, it's going to take time for students to build that habit of going straight to their seat and getting started right away, even with a teacher walking with them. And so it's important to at least have some sense of how do we want to respond to the behavior with warmth and accountability when it happens. And so the example that the teacher decided in this case was when a student isn't getting started right away, that they could just invite them to sit to work at a seat next to me. Like, I walked into the seat. They seem to have gotten up and walked away. I'll invite the student to come work at a seat next to me, and that's going to be how we keep the work going. Now, here is the most important row in this entire behavior support plan that's right here, and it's the can I do it? And if a teacher says yes, great, let's give it a try. And if a teacher says no, I really can't, we're going to want to probe that just a little bit. All right, which of these strategies do you think you're not really going to be able to do? And we're going to need to keep revising it 1,000,000 times if it takes that to get to a strategy that we're confident that we can do, because we don't want these behavior support plans to be works of aspirational fiction. We want these behavior support plans to be promises we know we can keep for students. And so that can I do it box ends up being really important just for that reason right here. All right, and so that's some examples of really just some of the key elements of effective behavior support planning. And there's that tier 1 problem solving template. You have both of those documents emailed to you. And in the live session, this is where we have some time reserved to talk through some specific strategies here. And so if you're watching the video, we didn't necessarily have that same time. And so I do encourage you to email me just the situations that you're working with right now. I'm happy to be a thought partner for you. If you'd like to schedule a short Zoom or a short phone call or a text me something, definitely let me know. And I want you to have that benefit of that time as well. But the most important thing is I'm just grateful for you, grateful for the ways that you show up for your students. I can't wait to find out how you live this learning out loud. And thank you so much for the love and the care that you bring to your school community each and every single day. Again, my name is Dr. Tim Grivois. I'm the Executive Director of TGS Educational Consulting, and this has been our video session in Effective Behavior Support Planning.